to Prevention Works. I'm Emily Hatchwell, the Opioid Program Specialist.
And I'm Michelle Simons, Prevention Coordinator for the City of Lynn.
And we have 3 guests today, so I'm going to turn it over to them so that they can introduce themselves.
My name is Richard Andrews, Jr. I'm a recovery coach specialist.
My name is Tito Rodriguez. I'm a lead recovery coach for the Police Assisted Addiction Recovery Initiative, known as PARI, and I work for the Angels program up in Gloucester, Mass.
My name's Arielle Goldman. I'm a student at North Shore Community College, and I work in treatment.
So today we're going to focus a lot on recovery. So that's why we kind of brought our 3 people in to talk about recovery. So we're going to give you some basic definitions of what other people define recovery as. So the first one is SAMHSA. So they define it as a process of change through which individuals improve their health and wellness, live a self-directed life, and strive to reach their full potential. And the second definition, which is by Connecticut Community for Addiction Recovery, is you are in recovery if you say you are in recovery. And then the final definition I'm going to give to you is actually from the dictionary. So they had 2 different definitions. So the first one is restoration or return to health from sickness. And the second one is restoration or return to any former or better state or condition. So we're actually going to turn it to our guests to talk about how they define recovery.
I would define recovery for me as just total abstinence and to get my health and quality of life back together compared to how I was living, being clean and sober and in recovery and practicing prevention helps me do that.
Awesome.
Well, as a person in recovery, there are many pathways to recovery, and the pathway and I've tried many of them, but the one that seemed to work for me has been abstinence-based. And for me, recovery is my ability to live life without the use of any chemicals or substances, and to deal with whatever's going on in my life, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing or an indifferent thing. I don't find the need to use anything. And if it's bad, usually if I use, it'll make it worse. Right. So I just try to, that's how I live my life.
Yeah.
Recovery for me, I think I talked about it a little bit last time, is like a complete change of direction in life. And it's about being good to yourself and others, and the ability to grow and change. A lot of times for me personally, it is not listening to my thoughts. It's pushing through the fears and walking through no matter what.
Nice. So we were talking about, when we talk about addiction and the disease of addiction, we're always talking about the devastation and the tragedy. And we know that exists. As soon as you say the word addiction, some things probably come to our mind, right? Like, I don't know, like what's the first thing that pops in somebody's head when I say that? Anybody got anything?
Yeah, being sick.
Yep.
Yeah, participating in a lot of illicit activities that would get me in trouble.
Right.
Also creating a lot of harm
Yep.
to the people that I love.
Right.
I think like a lot of pain and struggling
Yeah.
and sadness.
Yep. Yeah, actually, I was doing a little experiment actually with a DUI class that I teach this morning, and they were really helpful because I said, guys, I'm doing a show this morning, and we need some input from like what your average, person that isn't in recovery or maybe doesn't have an addiction thinks when you hear this, when you hear things like I'm an addict or I'm in recovery. What does that mean to you? So, and I was trying to kind of highlight that sort of stigma. So we think of all the devastation, but when we talk about recovery, I think we energize recovery. And I think a lot of people don't know that there's people with lots and lots of years of recovery, and it's actually, at least I'll speak for myself, it's a very joyful experience. So can any of you guys want to speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, my interpretation of it is it's just a freedom.
Yeah.
It's like you know, no more liquid handcuffs. You know, I can come and go as I, you know, choose, man. Recovery for me, it just put my life back together, financially, legal, medically. Just gave me a sound mind and body, and the freedom and the joy that it brings. I mean, I don't think I've smiled so much in my life, because I always used to have to walk around with that penitentiary face, but that doesn't exist anymore, you know, and that's what recovery did to me. Not just the material things, the internal, you know, it gives me a good feeling, something that I've never experienced with drugs and alcohol, especially when it comes to helping other people.
Yeah. So for our audience, because they might not know some of the terms that are kind of normal to us, two things you mentioned were liquid handcuffs and penitentiary face.
Yeah.
Can you describe them?
It's, the penitentiary face is that stone face,
Yeah.
you know, it's stay away from me, I got no time for you. Liquid handcuffs is like bondage, you know, I'm just strapped when it comes to drinking. If there's no alcohol there, I can't go out, or drugs. I was going to a family reunion in Ohio, and I didn't have enough drugs to bring with me, so I couldn't go.
Can't
So
go.
I was stuck. That's that freedom that it took away from me. But now, man, I got a passport.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's what I call freedom.
Yeah. Anybody else want to speak on that? Yeah.
For me, it's also about freedom, a lot of joy. Not every day is perfect. You know, there's some hard times, sad times, but they're a lot better than any day using. You know, in my recovery, I've gotten a lot of opportunities, things I would not be able to do if I was using, like traveling. I also have a passport. I do a lot of traveling, and I have the money to travel because I'm not spending it on drugs. But the best part for me is the self-love, the ability, not all the time, but the ability to learn to love yourself and have peace of mind. And also being able to connect with other people, having those interpersonal relationships. And I guess when I was younger, I was always longing for that, and I just didn't know how to connect with people. But the ability to love, like receive and give love, is there. You can't compare it to anything else.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah.
Tina?
Yeah, I think Rick used the word bondage or something, and I'm not in that state of bondage where I need drugs or alcohol to dictate what I do. You know,
Right.
I have that freedom now, and when I think of recovery, I think of that I'm a more authentic person,
Yeah.
because before, opiates or alcohol called all the shots of what I would be doing. And being authentic doesn't mean that I'm a perfect human being, though.
You're not perfect?
Not perfect, no. And I'm fine with that, and
Yeah.
I'm fine with that. You know, I know where, you know, the way I got sober and clean, you know, I had to participate in that process. And for the people who don't know 12-step recovery, you know, I got pretty intensely involved with the 12 steps of two particular programs, and that allowed me to look at myself. And I realized that, you know, I can take care of about 96% of what my makeup is,
Yeah.
but there's going to be 3 to 4% of my makeup that it's going to be a constant full-time job to me to work on. And that doesn't mean that I'm a perfect, you know, it's good. But you know, I just don't hurt people anymore. I don't want to. Someone said service, you know, I'm available to be of service.
Yeah.
And not because I'm getting paid for it right now. I was doing that for decades, you know. I'm a person, and say the politically correct thing, I'm a person in long-term recovery.
Right. What's the non-politically correct thing that you like to refer yourself as?
You know, I've been clean and sober since May 19th, 1982.
Yep.
I haven't found it necessary to pick up a drug or a substance for a long time.
Yeah.
And I've experienced a lot of joy. And some of the joy is my ability to deal with the bad situations.
Yes.
Whether they be medical,
Yep.
relationship, spiritual. You know, because sometimes I get off kilter. But I don't have, I'm so glad that I don't have to get high to deal with when I'm off kilter.
Yeah,
That freedom is amazing.
Yes.
Is amazing.
definitely.
I think it's exciting to deal with all of the emotions. You know, things may not feel good at the time, but, you know, it's kind of like being able to experience such a broad range of emotions for me is very exciting.
Yeah.
You know, being able to participate in my own life and, you know, wake up every day in a decent mood and just be able to like roll with the punches, whatever comes my way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, you know, when we're addicted to alcohol and drugs, it's, you know, we use over feelings, good, bad, or indifferent, or I'll speak, you know, from my own experience. And so, yeah, you learn to kind of face yourself and face all those feelings and what they're about and how to manage them, which, you know, sometimes the rest of the world, I mean, doesn't necessarily have that skill either, but they have other things that they use,
Yeah.
right? So I always, you know, people, sometimes we, you know, maybe as people in recovery separate ourselves from, you know, the so-called normal people that don't have addictions. But I actually think everybody has similar feelings and thoughts and emotions. And I think our coping skill is deadly. So somebody that's in recovery's coping skill, which might be to use heroin or alcohol or cocaine or whatever the drug of choice might be, could be deadly, opposed to somebody that's not in recovery. You know, they might binge watch some TV show, or they might shop and blow out their credit card or something like that. So maybe not deadly, there might be some consequences, but ours are so serious that we have to continue with this ongoing, like, growing process in order to, you know, make sure we're all right, you know? So, you know, Tito mentioned the 12-step process, and I believe some of you guys might be involved in that. Actually, I'm going to rewind a bit. I'm going to go back even further. What got you guys into recovery? I'll throw that question out there. Was there like a particular crisis or something going on at that time that got you into recovery in the first place?
Pine Street, Concord,
Yep.
Bill Ricker,
Yep.
Nashua Street.
I'm going to assume you're talking
South
about
Bay.
the legal system.
Yeah.
Yep.
So they were really, matter of fact, they saved my life.
Yeah.
You know, when it comes down to it, especially Pine Street, because I never ever thought I would be homeless.
Yeah.
That just was unforeseen. The thing I believe that also kept me out there too was like my pride.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a man, I'm not asking for help. I
Yeah.
can do this, I can manage it. Well, when I went to Pine Street, and I eventually ended up on Long Island Shelter, it was just an eye opener, you know, because I took everything for granted, you know.
Yep.
Remote control, take a shower by yourself.
Yep.
You know, I mean, there was just another way of life where you had to keep everything that was dear and near to you close. And, you know, it was, to me, it was worse than penitentiary, because there was a lot of people there that were suffering from mental illness too. And there wasn't that much like care. But I was fortunate and blessed, I'll say, because I had a case manager that really stuck out, and you know, she meant what she did, and she did it well. You know, and once I became committed, she started working her magic on me, and you know, it gave me a different perspective, not to take everything for granted, and you know, you got to work for things, because I thought if you had a job, you were a sucker, man. You paying taxes? Are you crazy?
Yeah.
You know, I'm a hustler, man. I'm not
Yeah.
doing that.
Yeah.
But it feels good to get up in the morning, you know, reading the newspaper, watching everybody else play with their phone.
Yep.
You know, to go to work and be a part of something that's special. And I think recovery to me is special, and you can't keep it unless you give it away.
Yeah. Cool. So I think a lot of us laughed when we talked about the job thing, because that's a typical kind of feeling, right? When you're in that active addiction, we see people, you know, driving to work and you're like, suckers, you know. I know, I remember that feeling, and it brought me back to that for a second. Like, wow, I remember that. And I don't know if it's a justification of, you know,
Where we're at.
to make you feel better, or if it's a reality at the time, you really believe that.
Yeah. But when you, in hindsight, when you think about it, when we're in our active, well, I can only speak personally, but hopefully you can identify. When you're in your active addiction, whatever it is that you're using,
Yep.
it's hard work getting the
Yes.
money.
Oh my God,
to do
24-hour
that.
job.
It's a 24/7
Yes.
job.
Yeah.
It's a hard job.
Yes.
And
So I know who's the sucker, really.
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. So one thing, Rick, you mentioned that really kind of jumped out at me, and I actually wanted to bring that up too, is that idea of a man getting into recovery. There might be some different obstacles from a woman, because there is that kind of stigma as a guy. You're tough, you don't need the help, you know, only suckers go for help, or things like that. So what, is it like a single person, or was there something inside you that knew, like, I got to get this help? Or
Well, Nashua Street was pretty convincing. But once I got back to Long Island, I had a woman. She was my case manager.
yeah,
And to be honest with you, I kind of had a problem taking direction from women,
Yeah.
you know. And I got 6 sisters, but I just wasn't hearing it, you know. But the reality of it was that she was telling the truth that I didn't like.
Yep.
I didn't want to hear. It didn't feel good. It was uncomfortable.
yeah,
But in the long run, she helped me see that, you know, I had to put my pride to the side and accept the help, because more than likely I was going to die if I kept doing what I was doing, you know. Show me another way, some more people. And most of the people in my life now in recovery, even where I work, they're all women.
yeah.
So, I mean, me personally, I like being around women. I don't have any problems with it. You know, so. But,
Careful.
yeah, that was just that macho stuff, man. They teach you on the street, man. You know, that's what I was taught. You know, definitely don't ask no woman for nothing, man.
Yeah.
No, man, you don't do that. But now I got no problem asking for help, you know, because I believe, at least this has been my experience, that people genuinely want to help you in recovery. They want to see you succeed. They don't want to see you fail, you know. And even when you fail, they got open arms saying welcome, because I was chronic relapser. And every time I came back, they always said welcome.
Yeah.
It was a little scary too, but I was like, okay.
Okay. Anybody else want to share about the sort of crisis or moment that got you there?
And again, it's after being sober for a while, I truly believe in, it's Carl Jung's theory of synchronicity.
Yeah.
And
I love that.
through a certain set of circumstances and events that just happened,
Yep.
I just got sober and clean. I was, like many of us, I was homeless, helpless, living in the weeds in Fresh Pond.
Yep.
And I wanted to die,
Yep.
but I didn't have, it's not the way, I didn't have the courage to kill myself.
Yep.
But I wanted to die, and I
Right.
knew I was going to die. And finally, I wasn't doing business with any entity, any God or anything at the time, but I looked up and I said, something's got to happen. And then I found myself going to the Salvation Army. I don't think it's there anymore, the detox in Kenmore Square,
Yep.
and knocked on the door.
Wow.
And
So
this
right down the
gentleman
street. Yeah.
came up, who later was a profound influence in my early recovery, said, we don't have a bed, but here's a pillow, and here's a blanket, and here's a price for you to get quarter pint. And I slept behind the dumpster, right, there was a dumpster right there overlooking the Mass Pike.
Yep.
And I went back there, I went and got me a quarter pint,
Yeah.
went back there, and stayed there. And he said, come back in the morning. And there was a bed for me in the morning. And then just things started to happen.
Wow.
I was at the detox and I met people there. And I wasn't really thinking of the next step.
Yeah.
You know how it is when you're getting detox after a couple of days. You get a little strength back.
Yeah,
you know,
like I can do this
3
again.
meals, yeah, exactly,
Yeah, yeah.
And then this guy started to talk to me about a halfway house in the south end of Boston, and I had a lot of those, but, and I need this, and he just happened to have an answer for everything that I said.
Good stuff, yeah.
And things just started to roll,
Right.
and I got into a halfway house, and anytime the thought of a drink or getting high came up, there was a circumstance that happened. I remember I was on a street corner, committed to go cop and get high. The bus on Tremont Street pulls up to pick up passengers. The door opens up, and the bus driver is somebody I was talking to at a meeting the night before.
God,
That stuff does that,
Yeah, divine
and that kind
intervention.
of stuff kept
Yeah.
happening,
Definitely.
And now, because I journal, and I started journaling pretty early on, and I read my old stuff, I said, there's Carl Jung theory.
Yeah.
Things happen for a reason,
Yep.
and they're unexplainable.
Yep.
And now I have a spiritual component to my recovery, and I know that it's the God that I believe in was working in my life when I couldn't work for myself.
Yeah, yeah,
There it is.
yeah. So Ariel, as far as like a crisis or a incident that might have happened that got you there?
I don't really remember like anything major. I didn't really lose anything externally. I was really lucky in that sense. Well, I don't know if that's lucky or not because it took me a while to, reach a rock bottom. But I started my like in and out of detox in 2013, and I was a chronic relapser. I could never stay clean. And now looking back, it's because I wasn't really willing to do what was suggested. But every single time I was in a treatment program, like it was like a little puzzle piece was given to me, and the seed was planted, and I started thinking about it, and I was like, nothing was like ever the same. I was like, oh, it's not the same anymore to get high, and it kept
Right.
ruining my high more and more and more and more, and I didn't get clean in 2013. I ended up switching over to a different drug of choice. But I think that, the loss of my relationship with my parents was a huge factor in it because I'm an only child, so it's always been, me and them.
Yep.
And, just like the loss of myself, and I just couldn't, like, I was just so broken that I just couldn't do it anymore. I was just so ready to stop, and I was fine, in 2017, I was finally ready to like take all the suggestions
Got it.
and finally open up my ears and really listen because I saw it had worked in other people's lives, and I was like, you know what, I might as well give this a shot. I clearly can't figure this out on my own.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's different obstacles to treatment, like for everybody, and each of you guys sort of access treatment a different way. Like you knocked on the detox door, and the legal system got you where you went, and for you it was like just that empty, like devastating feeling, like I gotta, losing your family and things like that. What we know now that there are a lot of obstacles for people, and actually a lot of like what Emily and I are trying to do is like make it easier for people to access treatment, like some of the things, if you want to talk a little bit about like some of the things that Prevention Works does.
I know on Facebook we always post available beds. Well, not always. We try to post it every day.
When I do it,
for available beds, and we
Right.
also put a lot of other resources up there as well. I just put the SAMHSA resource up today.
Yeah.
They have the Find Treatment Map. And then always at our events, we have stuff out for people, and if they ask, we're always willing to talk to them and help them out.
Yeah. So like, for people that have been there, we know, how we found treatment. Do you guys have any suggestions as far as like we have this grant, we have the ability to get out there and talk to people and help people hopefully access treatment. What's some of the barriers we can help sort of knock down so people could navigate that?
I know for me, I would pick and choose where I wanted to go. I don't know if it's unfortunately or fortunately, I've been to so many detoxes that I knew their protocol. I knew the food they
Yeah.
they served. I knew where you could smoke and where you couldn't.
Yep.
Yeah.
I had this one place in particular that I used to love because you didn't have to get out of bed. But the thing about it was, when I stopped being so picky about where I wanted to go,
Yeah.
things started to happen for me. Because I didn't utilize the services they had that would have helped me. I was just looking for the recreation. You know,
Okay.
I was just looking for the easy stuff, especially the food, you know. Because I usually went in there, I don't know if I weighed like 240 now. Can you picture me 168 pounds?
Yeah.
Because that's what I was doing there, and I just go in there to beef up.
Yep.
So I would be not so much choosy, because just like today, there's no such thing as coincidence. You know, God got a plan. If you end up somewhere, that's where you're supposed to be.
Yeah.
And the thing about it is doing the best you can with what they have to offer. And you never know where help's going to come from. You know, my mother used to tell me all the time, sometimes help doesn't feel like help.
Wow.
You know,
Yeah.
because people always think it's pleasant. So I mean, well, you know,
Right.
sometimes it's work.
Yeah, that's, wow, what a great piece of advice, though, because it's true. You're like, you know, we think of help as, oh, it's going to be soothing and nice,
Yeah.
and somebody's going to give me a back rub or something and
Right.
spoon feed me like some sweet treats or something. But yeah, it's more, sometimes it can feel a little uncomfortable, or a lot uncomfortable, right?
Yeah. I think because of the greater attention being paid to addiction nowadays,
Yeah,
there's so many options there. And, you know, granted, so, you know, I mean, the individual clearly needs to ask themselves, is it time? And they can only answer that.
right.
But when the time comes, you know, there's a wealth of opportunities. I think it could be bigger, but you know, you can use like people, the individuals here, you know, 12-step recovery. But there's medically assisted. There's a lot of I don't want to say religious, spiritual ways to deal with it. People use health and fitness or whatever.
Right.
You know, but to work with somebody who's got some experience in all of that
Yeah.
to help you guide you in whatever it is you want to do.
Right.
And that doesn't mean you're going to stay stuck there
Yeah.
on whatever you choose. You know,
Absolutely.
just like they say, addiction is progressive, and so is recovery. And there's ways you can do that, and you don't stay stuck in that. You know, and you just move on.
Right.
You know,
Right.
which is hard because in the community I work with,
Yeah.
and as a recovery coach, I'm also a known entity there.
Yeah.
So people always, I throw people a curb. They say, I don't want to talk to Tito because, you know, I know he got sober. And
Yeah, he's going to be a
but
12-step
all I talk
guy.
about is, look, where you at? What do you want to do?
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's just try to get you stopped.
Yeah.
And then we'll figure out how to stay stopped.
Right.
And how to make that easier for you.
Yeah.
And if we need to go to the clinic, we'll go to the clinic. Whatever we need to do
Yep.
is just creating some distance between you and that last bag of narcotics or that last shot of Jack Daniels or whatever it is. You know, let's
Keep you
create some
alive.
distance.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a lot options, but there could be more.
Right. Right. Yeah, one of the recovery coaches that we taught the course with at North Shore Community College, I remember he, you know, kind of shouted out to our class. He's like, "What's the biggest obstacle of somebody getting in recovery?" And everybody's shouting out a few things here and there, here and there. And everybody finally kind of stopped shouting out, and he was like, "Dead." Biggest obstacle to recovery, dead.
Yeah.
So helping people stay alive is the motivation until, you know, whatever path they may choose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting stuff.
Yeah.
So our experience with active addiction and getting into recovery is all different as well. Tito was recently on a show that a friend of ours, we'll put his name out there, I
Yeah.
guess. Friend of ours, Richard Zombak, who does
Buds with Suds.
Buds with Suds. So
Yep.
Emily's a big fan. I'm a fan.
Yep.
He does a podcast, and he also works as a recovery coach. And I was listening to the interview with you and Richard Zombak about some things that I wanted to hear more about, because you were talking about growing up in the Bronx. You were talking about using back then and how different it is now. They weren't, talking about opening up a safe room for everybody to go smoke crack in back then, or have a safe injection site, right? And nowadays we hear a lot, there's a lot of pushing for things like safe injection sites and harm reduction, where, places are giving out clean needles and clean paraphernalia and things like that. So like decriminalizing.
Yeah.
So what are your feelings around that? Considering
Well, now the organization I work with is, it's a healthier police response to dealing with addiction.
Yeah.
In my day, sort of what you said, the police response was stop and frisk.
Yep.
If you had narcotics on you, you were going away. Yeah. We did have safe injection sites, but they came from the community. I used to call them drug dens or whatever. But you can go to a house and you pay a nominal fee, which is a corner of your bag of dope or whatever, and you can get high and you can hang out for a little bit. And so we had versions of that.
Right.
But it was the community of substance abuse users.
So other people that were using.
Yeah, using,
would offer,
but there wasn't the attention paid to it like it was before, and I firmly, when it comes to opiate addiction, the color of the landscape changed dramatically. When it was people of color and people with last names like Rodriguez and Sanchez.
Andrews.
And the response was a whole lot, and there wasn't attention paid to it.
Right.
Now, I don't want the poor me kind of stuff. Some of it was that
the truth.
when you're involved in active addiction, particularly back then,
Yeah.
you were in the business of trying how you're going to hustle, how you're going to make money, and all of that. You didn't have the time and the wherewithal, or I didn't have the time, and my family didn't have the time to advocate for me.
Yeah.
Fast forwarded a bunch of decades now, and like I said, the color of the landscape has changed. The people who were dying are a little bit different than the people who were dying when I was shooting narcotics. But that family system can advocate. They have that.
Right.
My grandmother couldn't advocate. She was working in 2 different hospitals.
Yep.
She had to worry about getting on the train and making it home and this.
Yeah.
She couldn't advocate for me.
Yep.
But now there's advocacy is there,
Yeah.
and it surfaced the issue.
Right.
So now everybody's paying attention to it,
Yep.
and I'm glad for that.
Yeah.
But I just want to remind people
Right.
that it wasn't that way
Agreed.
30 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad for it too, but I also, there's that underlying like, wow, we're just noticing this. Do you have anything you want to add to that, Rick?
I gotta take a deep breath.
Yeah, no.
I don't know, because I feel the same way. It's always been an epidemic in my neighborhood.
Yeah.
It's always been. You call them injection sites, I call them shooting galleries.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
It's the same thing, just a different name, Dang, I can't even say what I want, but regardless, it's like,
You can.
it doesn't matter to me now. What matters to me now is that we kill the monster, and the monster is addiction. I can't change what happened yesterday. It pisses me off, but that was yesterday. This is today.
Yeah.
So I want to work with today and keep it moving.
Yeah.
And my thing ain't politics, it's people.
Right.
My thing ain't trying to be politically correct, it's service. So as long as I can feel good about doing something to help somebody to get where they're supposed to be, because see, someone jumped down in that hole that I was in and showed me the way out, And the reason that happened, because he said, hey man, I've been here before, so I know the way out. And that's how I feel today. With the long timers, you know, the people struggling, I learn from everybody, you know, because I know for a fact that I'm not exempt. And I have to keep my foundation strong. And this is how I do it, hanging around people that are trying to make a difference, you know, hanging around people that's got something positive going on. Because when I was in active addiction, the only thing that mattered was, you know, where I could hit a lick, who had the good diesel, you know. But today, them things are way past me, you know, and I carry the scars. But I don't participate in that today, you know. And I was around the way, and I was talking to some friends that were still, you know, doing their 1-2. And I just say, and I don't go around there, you know, with an NA or AA cape on.
Yeah.
You know, this is a program of action, because it's not what I say, it's what I do. And you could see that, you know, not just in my appearance, but in my conversation, because I'm talking something positive, something that's going to help you. And I tell them, when you're ready, come on. I don't say you need to, you got to, you should.
Right.
When you're ready, I'm here, you know. Don't leave before the miracle happens.
Yes.
Man. I think what's important, and I think we all have a piece of it, probably at different levels and stuff, is, you said was on right on. I mean, for me, but I think it applies to all of us. To keep what we have to be of service and give it
Yeah.
away.
No question.
But also I also need to remember that I need to do certain things on a daily basis to maintain what I have. And some of that is being of service.
Right.
But I also need to be of service to myself.
Yeah.
And some of that might mean involvement in my recovery, whether it's for me going to meetings. There's a wellness part to my recovery where I try to take care of myself physically, and and just like I try to work on these aging muscles that I have, I also try to exercise my spiritual muscle on a daily basis.
Yes.
And I have certain things that I do in my recovery that massages those spiritual muscles.
Yep.
And it doesn't mean, again, that I'm a perfect or whatever, but it just enhances my relationship with the higher entity that I believe in,
Right.
who I choose to call God today.
Right. Yeah. Did you want to add to that at all? Or?
I don't want to scare people away now.
Tito is perfect for our audience, though. Did you want to add anything to any of that?
Not at the moment.
You don't have to.
Just kind of listening and enjoying
Okay.
the conversation.
Cool.
I'm a peer leader also down at this Recovery Safe and Sound on Albany Street on the Mile, and we do a lot of outreach work.
Yeah.
And the director of my program, he's been clean and sober 30 some odd years.
Wow.
But he doesn't go to NA or AA.
Yeah.
He's sort of like what you were saying, but he says he's delivered by Jesus Christ. But he, you know,
Yeah.
and he doesn't come to the center like preaching and
Yeah.
all that stuff.
Right.
And he just maintains that dignity and respect about yourself, because
Yeah.
if I take care of myself, then I can take care of somebody else.
Right.
If I don't take care
Exactly.
of myself,
Yeah.
how can I take care of somebody else? And if I don't practice what I preach,
Right.
I'm a hypocrite.
Meaningless. Right.
Yeah.
Right. We do see a lot of people that work in the field relapse because of that sort of. I mean, there's probably a huge amount of reasons.
Yeah.
But I know that desire to give back can sometimes really take over our entire being. Do any of you guys want to touch on any of that?
Yeah.
Is that
I don't want to create any controversy
No,
with
no.
folks, but
I'll create the
my
controversy.
mentor, who had a profound effect in helping me get sober, stay sober, and continue on my path,
Yeah.
used to say, "You can't give away what you ain't got."
Yes.
Huh? Say that.
And like I said earlier, the disease is progressive and recovery is progressive. So you just need to go. however route you choose to stay clean,
Yeah.
whether it's spiritual conversion, religious, 12 steps, MAT, combination of all of that stuff
Yeah.
is, you go through certain cycles in recovery.
Yeah.
When you talk to old timers and I remember my person who mentored me, he could talk to somebody and he can tell you within a 4-month span how long that person was sober and clean.
Wow.
Just by the way they talked
Yep.
and how they described the incidences and how they were dealing with what was going on in their life that way.
Yeah.
He would say, people respond differently depending on their level of distance away from their last
Yep.
drink and draw. And I believe that.
Yeah.
And I believe that,
Yeah.
you know, and I can't, whether it's professionally or helping someone personally,
Mm-hmm.
if I haven't experienced it or if I haven't had any practice of that, how can I sort of share stuff,
Right.
you know?
Yeah. So kind of like
And
what
that's
Rick said,
just
you
me.
can't give away what you don't have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I used to think no one knew I was high. my mother used to tell me, she said, boy, Ray Charles could see you.
Yeah.
Nah, I'm all right.
Right. It's everybody looking at it.
All out of character.
Right.
But again, I like the idea about prevention because if you know, I think about that. I never stole nothing until I used. I never stole nothing. But as soon as I got active, man, everything was up for grabs.
Right.
You know,
Right.
because I was taught another way. My sponsor says I was misinformed.
Yeah.
You know, because I thought that was the right way. But at the time, it was the people that I was hanging around that accepted me because of that, you know. And I find it the same thing here, you know, and in recovery, you know, I practice spiritual. And to me, that's how I feel, you know, because if it don't feel right, something's wrong.
Yeah.
You know, I used to tell my kids when they was little, you know, if someone touches you and it don't feel right, something's wrong.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing here with recovery, you know, and I'm feeling it. I like it.
Yeah. So you get that sort of inner conscience starts to build.
Yeah.
When you use we're on the street, things like that, you kind of shut that down. You don't want to hear that voice
Yeah.
of what's right and wrong, even if we were brought up with some values.
Yeah.
And because you have to do what you have to do to maintain addiction. I guess like we have to do what we have to do to maintain recovery.
Yeah.
So you got all three of you touched on spirituality. I think people get really kind of sketchy if they were brought up in a really religious family, and so they come into these 12-step fellowships and they hear the word God or they hear spirituality, and they automatically associate it with religion.
Yeah.
Where if you've been in for a little bit, we understand the difference of spirituality versus religion. Can you guys touch a little bit on some of what you mean by spirituality?
Well,
Everybody cringes.
I go-
This is the funnest part, guys.
no, it's cool.
Yeah.
I go to a spiritual group every Friday, men and women.
Yeah.
And what we talk about is the things we do, you know, being sound moral character,
Yeah.
you know, don't cheat on your taxes, you know, to do the right thing. That's spiritual for me,
Yeah.
you know, because I get a good feeling in my inside when, you know, now when I'm paying my taxes,
Yep.
you know, I get a good feeling inside, you know, when I help somebody carry something, you know, when before, I'm telling you, I wouldn't do nothing for nobody unless I was getting something out of this,
Right.
you know. But now I want to do something for somebody and expect nothing in return.
Yeah.
And that's spirituality for me.
And what does that do for you?
It makes me feel good.
Yeah.
It gets my adrenaline running.
Yeah.
It gives me goosebumps.
Yep.
It makes me smile.
Yeah.
You know, it feels good.
Cool.
I'm a feel good kind of
Yeah,
guy.
me too. I like that.
when I first got clean and sober for a number of years, I wasn't really doing business with a God.
Yeah.
And because I was taught to get up in the morning and ask something for help, I would always ask my sponsor's God for help. But after about 3 years, and like I mentioned, through the synchronicity of my life, I realized something was working in my life.
Yep.
And just about that time, I had read, I don't want to plug a book, this book called Spirituality of Imperfection.
Yeah.
And it had a profound effect on me.
Right.
And it has to do with a 12-step program.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It has to do with Alcoholics Anonymous and realizing, but I realized that it's all right to be imperfect. It's to constantly just work on yourself.
Right.
I remember my sponsor said, I told him, he said, I like cheating, stealing, all that. He says, well, it's about, let's decrease the amount of times you lie, cheat,
Right.
and steal. And then by doing that stuff, you know, I realized that with my imperfections, I can still stay clean and sober
Yep.
and be available to other people.
Right.
And that's when I realized how imperfect I was. That's when the spiritual component of my recovery started to sort of take off a little bit.
Yep.
And I started to search for things that would make me feel better as a whole and contribute to society.
Right. Sort of that self-acceptance piece of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. None of us are going to be perfect, that's for sure. But
So for my spirituality, I try to keep it really simple. Growing up Jewish, I kind of always believed in a God. I knew that whatever it was out there. I just wasn't seeking it for a while.
Yep.
But I try to like keep it, you know, someone once broke it down for me like GOD, good orderly direction. So I kind of try to keep it simple like that, just by like, you know, I feel the presence of God when I'm doing the right thing for the right reason. And to me that means like the good orderly direction, and that's where I get that good feeling, and I feel warm, like God is with me. You know, I'm not really like that big of like a day-to-day. I try to talk to God every once in a while, but I try to live through God's will by just like doing good things for myself and for other people, and just trying to be a good person. And with that, I always feel God's presence.
Nice.
Yeah.
So we talked about like recovery being progressive, like the disease is progressive. So just for our audience sake, something we talk about like with the disease of addiction, we say it's progressive, incurable, and fatal, right? So it gets worse over time. There is no so-called cure, and it's fatal. We know people die from it, right? But another like positive side of progression is recovery. So what we needed or do at maybe 6 months sober and clean, or maybe very different at 2 years, maybe very different at 5, and so on. And I don't think, you know, that's not talked about a lot either. So especially when we're talking about people that are working in the field and are constantly surrounded by people that are sort of, like you're sort of swimming in the disease, especially if you're working around people that are actively using or really, you know, recently clean. There's a lot of stuff. It's a lot of, you know, I don't know how else to put it, but stuff kind of floating around. And, you know, the disease is powerful. And they say things like it takes 2 for 1, you know, like you trying to save me from my active addiction, chances are we're both going to be in active addiction. So how do people sort of like stay in the fields that you're in and be okay?
Self-care.
Yeah.
Self-care.
Oh yeah,
Self-care.
definitely.
Is that like getting your nails done
No.
and getting your hair? No.
You can, but
Well,
that's not
that's
it.
part of it. That's part of
I'll
it.
take a pedicure.
Very powerful.
Hey, I like
It's
them.
fun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like the self-care part.
Yeah.
You know, because it's like, I never pictured myself in Aruba, you know.
Yeah.
I never pictured myself going to a meeting at 7:30 in the morning in Aruba while I was on vacation, you know. I never pictured that when I got there was going to be 8 other women from Massachusetts that we just held the whole meeting hostage, and we went out to breakfast and had a good time, you know? I mean, to me, that's just a blessing, you know? It's like, no such thing as coincidence. I'm right where I'm supposed to be. And it's, again, I equate that to doing the right thing, you know? And I could talk about my mother all day because she was just a wise lady. But the thing about it, at that particular time, her insight, it didn't relate to the world I was living in. But today, it means all that and some, you know? So recovery, again, like I said, it just puts lives back together. It put mine. I never thought I'd end up in UMass, you know? I was shooting dope up on Humboldt Ave in the shooting gallery, you know what I'm saying? Never thought, you know, I have a good job at a pretty good institution, you know? I never thought that I would meet people like you, you know?
Yep.
I wouldn't associate with you because you didn't know what I wanted to do. But we're on the same page here, and the only way we're gonna get stronger is unity, networking, you know, them connections. And that's how I feel that my participation in my recovery is essential, and the only way it's gonna work for me if I put some work in. I'm trying to think of this word, my friend, osmosis, he tells me, it's just not gonna just poof. You know, you have to participate, you have to get busy. I mean, when I woke up in the morning and I was ill, you know, I couldn't just sit there and wait for something to happen. I had to make it happen.
Right.
And that's the same thing here when my sponsor tells me, you take 10% of that energy that you use to get high and put it towards something positive and you blow right up. And that's been my experience here, you know, because I mean, I've used for over 45 years, but I've only been clean since 2012.
Yeah.
And in that short period of time, my mother, again, she used to tell me, Rick, stay available for the blessings. I couldn't catch them in the shooting gallery, in the crack house, hanging on the corner.
Yep.
Yeah.
But networking and being around people that's trying to make a difference, the blessings just keep coming.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, it's taking care of yourself. And again, you know, there's a wellness, fitness part of it.
Yep.
For me, like I said before, there's a component of my recovery, and it took a while to get there, is that, you know, that I take some time during the course of my day to dialogue, or not really dialogue, to listen what this higher entity I have working in my life, its purpose is for me today. And it's always to stay sober and clean.
Number one, right? Yeah.
And then, you know, for me, you know, find something that you're passionate about and do it.
Yeah.
And sober.
Yeah.
If you love to cook, cook.
Yeah.
You know, if you love being with your kids, you know, whatever it is.
Right.
You know, you've gotten the gift of creating some distance between you and your drug of choice.
Yep.
Enjoy life.
Enjoy it.
And take life, you know, and take care of yourself, because going back to 12-step recovery is you might be the only version of a big book that someone encounters.
Wow. Wow.
So you might be the physical presence
The manifestation of
of that,
yeah.
and you have to be available and stuff.
Yeah.
I just want to say, she said something that really really, for me,
I was like, I did.
I don't know about the presence of an entity.
Yeah.
When I'm with somebody who's in recovery,
Yep.
whether it's personally or through work, but when we're trying to work through something, whether it's a problem they're having or whether it's good things happening.
Yeah.
But when we're doing that one-on-one with it, usually it's with another guy.
Yeah.
My sponsor always would say to me, look for the presence of he would use God, I'll
Yeah.
use higher entity. And I do, and I can always feel the presence
it, yeah.
of something working in that communication.
Awesome.
Always. And if I were getting high,
Yeah.
believe me, I wouldn't be paying attention to that.
Yeah. So we have about a minute left, and then we're gonna, Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. And did you have anything last you wanted to say?
Yeah, about like the self-care, and I think we were talking about that a little bit earlier, and then working in treatment. You know, I find that like I can't help other people unless I'm taking care of myself. And I think a lot of times what happens is people work in treatment and then they forget. I think you mentioned like people working in treatment and relapsing.
Yeah.
I think it's because they forget about themselves. And I definitely struggle in that area.
Yeah.
You know, I help people within my job and outside of my job as well.
Yep.
I sponsor a couple women, but I have to take care of me.
Yeah.
I have to set boundaries. Boundaries are the biggest form of self-care for me.
Yeah.
When I have to listen to my body. You know, if I'm tired, I need to have a day to kind of unwind and decompress, because if I'm just go, 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 I'm going to hit a wall. And then before you know it, I'm just an emotional, mental disaster. And I definitely struggle with that. I've had a few experiences where I'm just running around aimlessly and then boom, I hit a wall and I'm like, why am I having a breakdown?
Yeah.
You know, but it's really like the key for me is all about balance. It's a balance of taking care of yourself, taking care of your responsibilities, and taking care of other people as well.
Awesome.
Okay.
We want to thank you guys from the bottom of our hearts
Thank
for being
you.
here and being so
Thank
open.
you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming
yes.
and talking with us. Just the last thing we wanted to do is just post a list of resources for anybody who is looking for any recovery groups. And thank you guys for tuning in and listening. So we hope to see you next week.
Awesome.